Hey everybody, today I'm taking a look at Ark Nova, which is a board game published by Capstone Games in 2021. This one accommodates 1 to 4 players and takes around 2.5 hours to play, around that time frame. And this one is designed by Matthias Wigger, who I must say I've never heard of, so I think this is a first design of his. Now if you can't tell from the artwork, this one is all about building a zoo, and it's a pretty heavy and involved Euro strategy game. Okay, so there's quite a lot going on in this game, and I'm going to try and be as brief as I can with the rules overview so I can get into that more detailed review. So first off, let's have a brief look at the setup here. So each player is going to have their own personal setup, which looks like this, which shows their own player board, which is their own zoo. So as you can see here, you've got all these different hexes on the board, and these are different spaces that you can plot these enclosures on, which are going to be basically the cages for your animals. You've got different ones, you've got big ones, you've got small ones, depending on the type of animal that needs it. You've also got these different kiosks and things which can give you points or income. You've got this little track down here along the side where if you make certain conservation contributions, you can get one-off benefits or ongoing benefits. You've got this little track here where you can partnership with other zoos from around the world and get animals at discounts. You've got this little university track here where you get these tiles in and get these microscope tokens and these mortarboard tokens to increase the reputation of your zoo, and you're going to start with none of those, but you can end up investing and getting more of them and potentially getting bonuses as you go along. And you've got workers here, which you're going to start with 1, but you can unlock more as you go, again potentially unlocking bonuses as you go. And more importantly, you've got this little row of cards at the bottom of your board, which is the different actions you can take throughout the game, and we'll go into that in a bit more detail. This is the end of the game, so we've got here a bunch of cards that I've built out during my turn. So these are all the different animals, and this is what the animals look like. So like I've got a giraffe here, and the anatomy is going to look like this, where this is the cage they need. So this one needs at least a 3 size cage. This is the amount of coins or money it takes to purchase that particular animal. And you've got some symbology here which acts as kind of prerequisites and different bonuses that you can get for set collection and in-game scoring, all that kind of thing. And you've got kind of one ongoing and engine building benefits as well. And there's so many of them that I'm not going to be able to go into all of them because there is a huge deck of cards here, and I think every single animal in it is unique. And the main board is going to look like this, where basically you've got 2 tracks. One is going to be the appeal of your zoo, which is basically how you're going to attract customers. And the higher it is, when it comes to a kind of an income phase, then you're going to take up more money. And you've also got the conservation track here, which means when you get one of those conservation points, you jump up a certain amount of spaces, which is obviously clearly a lot more valuable than an appeal, because for every appeal here, you can only have to go up one of these conservation tracks to jump a whole bunch of them. The idea of this game is you're trying to get your appeal and your conservation to cross over, and when you do that, and if several people do it at once, you count the difference between the players, but essentially you're trying to do that as quickly as you can to beat the other players to the punch. And there's also separate boards here that you can use which relates to that almost like worker placement style thing, where you can make donations to these different, donations basically to conservation, and climb up that conservation track. You can climb up this reputation track in the center of the board here, where you climb up these spots, potentially giving you options to draft cards with a bit more control than you would if you just draft from the main deck. And as you can see again, if you reach certain checkpoints, you get bonuses such as drawing cards or getting conservation points, getting these bonus X tokens, which will count as a strength higher than your normal action that you would take. And you've also got this break track here, because whenever you take a certain amount of actions, or a certain action or particular action, this is going to go down on this track. When it hits to this spot here, you're basically going to go into an admin phase where you're going to take workers back. You're going to get income based on certain things you have going on in your zoo, and all different things like that, even like refreshing the card row, etc. Resources are going to look a bit like this, where you've got all your different cage sizes, all these different kiosks and things, and the different tokens that you're going to use throughout the game. Additionally, you've got some kind of end game criteria and ongoing criteria that you can work towards. So each player is going to start with 2 end game cards given to them. So mine here was to basically keep my zoo a bit empty, because it's going to be a naturalist zoo. So for every empty space, I'm going to get a certain amount of conservation points at the end of the game. Or this one here, based on my reputation, I'm going to get a certain amount of points. And there's a whole bunch of those, so each game is going to be slightly different. And you've also got these conservation bonuses that you can work towards. For example, this one here, this herbivore token might say, I need a certain amount of herbivore icons in my zoo. And you can see here, as the yellow player, I've claimed that by having 5 herbivores amongst the animals that I've collected. So I suppose I should explain how the game actually works from a mechanical standpoint. So all you're going to do on your turn is that you're going to choose one of your action cards from this row of cards, and then you're going to move it to the back of the queue and push all the other ones along, making them stronger. Because as you can see here, you start with a strength 1 and you go up to a strength 5, and this is constantly revolving depending on the actions you select. And also, additionally, when you get to certain points in the game, you're going to flip these cards over to the upgraded side to get improved versions of those actions. And you can only do that 4 times in the game, so you're always going to have one at the weakest stage no matter what. So you can see here I've upgraded 4 of my 5 cards, and let's take a look at what they do. So the first one here is the association task, which associates to this part of the board here, where again, as I said, you can get these partnership icons to get those discounts, you can get these university tokens, and potentially just invest in one of these conservations. You've got the animals here, which lets you just play animal cards from your hand. So as you can see, if you've got a strength 1, you cannot take that action. But if you got up to a strength 5, you can actually play 2 animals from your hand at any time, where, you know, I might want to play one of these cards. You've got the draw card action, where you can either take from the top of the deck, or you can actually take from how far you are on the reputation track, but the kind of the basic version of that isn't quite as strong. And if you ever see this action here that says snap, it means that you can take any card you want from the card row to, again, get some more control and not be so dependent on the luck of the draw. You've got the sponsors action here, which lets you play these really interesting blue cards, and I will say this is probably one of my favourite part of the games. And these do lots of weird things and cool things that make your zoo different to other people. So for example here, I've got this migration recording ability, which means that I can actually release, whenever I release an animal into the wild by potentially using one of these conservation bonuses, then I actually get an extra conservation point, and I can do it more than once, because normally you'd only ever be able to take one of these conservation bonuses once, but you can see here I've broken that rule and done that twice. So yeah, there's lots of cool things that those conservations can do. And we'll cover a few of those a bit later. And additionally, you've got the build action there, which lets you build a certain amount of buildings depending on the strength. So again, if I had strength 4, I could build up to a strength 4 building, potentially more than that, calculating up to a strength 4 if I had the upgraded version. But you have to pay money twice to the size of the enclosure. So if I had a size 4 enclosure, I have to spend 8 money to do that. So despite being a very involved game, you can probably tell here from the kind of user interface, the game is actually very easy to digest and understand, because you are only ever doing one of these actions at a time. And again, they're all very simple in their own right. No complication there whatsoever, but where all the gameplay lies is in the way that the cards interact with one another. So it's all about playing these cards as efficiently as you can in the best order to get discounts and bonuses, etc. So there's quite a lot going on here, and I'll cover what a few of these things do. So you can see here as well, like a lot of these cards need certain criteria in order to build them in the first place. So for example, to build this Sumatran tiger, I needed to have 2 of these microscope icons, because that's what that red little banner means. But you know, if you invest in one of these, then you might be able to do that. And then again, you have to pay the money. Sometimes the enclosures have to go next to particular locations on your player board. So you can see here my tiger likes to go next to 2 water spaces, so therefore I'd have to maybe put it in this enclosure because it's next to 2 water spaces. And even some animals, like these domestic rabbits, they don't take up much space at all, and in fact you can buy one of these petting zoos, which means that you can actually store several animals in a petting zoo depending on their size. So it's another way to store animals more efficiently, because as you can tell here from the size of the board, it is finite. You can't just keep placing enclosures, because if you do, then you're going to run out of space. And even sometimes you can send off animals to conservation projects and release them into the wild in order to free up those enclosures to build new animals. So I'm going to jump straight in and give some thoughts on this game, otherwise I'll be here explaining rules forever. First off, this actual main system is absolutely fantastic. I love this. I know it is recycled from another game, but I've never seen it before and I've never played with it before. You know, as you are taking actions, they're getting weaker and going back to the queue and charging back up again. But you can choose to use them, but they're just not going to be as strong if you keep spamming the same action. I also think this game does a phenomenal job of, again, embedding so much depth and so much complexity into such a simple kind of framework, and the actual, again, that user interface of the game is just absolutely brilliant in relation to the depth and scope and feel of the game. That's absolutely so well done. I actually like the spatial puzzle as well, because again, a lot of these animals very thematically might want to live next to mountains. You know, if you have rock-dwelling birds or something. Certain animals will need to go next to the water. All that good stuff. And there's all the nice spatial puzzles that you need to work out to plan your things most efficiently, and again, accordingly to what you need in terms of the animals that you're going to place. The animals themselves, I mean, the breadth of what these could do is just absolutely outstanding. Every animal is unique. Everything does a different benefit. Some of them will let you climb the points track. Some will but generally, they'll let you climb the points track. But ones like this will let you go the reputation track. You've got animals that will score you points based on different things. Like my rabbit here says I get 3 points for each petting animal icon in my zoo. So then it's all about playing these in the right order and getting the most points out of them. The sponsor cards are absolutely fantastic and will really help you tailor towards a certain strategy and approach you're going to take in the game. Like this one here, if you take the primatologist, you're going to get 3 money each time you place a primate in your zoo. Or the aquarium one, where it says each time you play a water icon in your zoo, you're going to get two appeal points. And even you get these bonus tokens, which will be very kind of bespoke buildings you can put onto your zoo, which will cover up certain things, but will give you unique benefits, and they're all different. You've got like the bird ones as well, and again, a ton of different animals to make you take loads of different approaches and create new strategies. I also really enjoy this braking system that keeps the game flowing very nicely, because this game isn't broken up into rounds or phases or anything like that. You simply go down this break track when you take certain actions, like this one will say, break 2, or sometimes when you take money, for each coin you take, you have to break and go down that track. And when it hits that certain point, then you're going to have to go through that kind of admin phase. But because it comes up, sporadically and not all the time, it doesn't feel so jarring and mechanical. It feels nice and free and open, where you can actually enjoy the gameplay without much disruption. And when it does trigger, it's exciting because you get to take all your income and refill your bank full of coins in order to invest in new animals and stuff like that. But you've got to be quite careful with this as well, because as you can see here, the first thing you do when it comes to a break is that you discard your hand down to your hand limit, which is generally 3, which might sound very low, and it is quite low, particularly if you want to stockpile those cards. But you can actually upgrade it to 5 by taking a particular university token. So yeah, I really like this break system. You can catch your opponent off guard with it. If they have a massive handful of cards, they want to use them, you just keep breaking and make them get rid of all those cards, which you can argue that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I like the way it does kind of make an effort to add some player interaction into the game, because generally this is pretty multiplayer solitaire. Now, I would say that the card play, and again, I'm not going to go into the depth of the card play because it is as rich as it probably, as you can imagine. You think of games like Underwater Cities, games like Terraforming Mars. This is very much in the same vein. There's just infinite amounts of variables and bonuses and combos and things you can go for, which is fascinating, and most of them are pretty thematic as well. Yeah, I would say the card play and this row system are top notch. I think they're fantastic. And that upgrading system and stuff like that is absolutely great. Now, I would say that the weakest part of the game for me is this association board, and not necessarily the investment bit. I like that, the fact that when you make these donations, I suppose, to these conservation projects, it gets more expensive as it goes on. And when you do that, you can potentially take these cubes off as well, which will give you, again, more income or instant bonuses, such as a big cash injection, conservation points, a new worker, all that good stuff. But I would say that these, or particularly this university action, feels a bit like you're going through the motions, that you'll probably get them all anyway, and it's not particularly difficult to get that completed. And again, every game you're pretty much going to get it done pretty snappy. So yeah, I would have liked to have seen a bit more development on this, make it a bit more difficult to get all those different universities, maybe some more prerequisites. But this part here, where if you get those 5 association board points, you can invest in one of these different conservation projects. That's great. You have 3 here, or depending on the player count, you can have 4 static ones. But you can also introduce your own different conservations, which will shift these down to make those opportunities quite rare, not quite rare, but quite quick. You need to act quick to get them completed, because they can potentially shift off the board and you could waste your opportunity, which you might be building towards for a while. So yeah, I like how kind of temporary these are, and that you need to act quickly before they vanish. So mechanically, there really isn't anything I dislike about this game. It's all top notch, to be honest. Again, maybe a slight weakness on that association board, but generally the rest of it is pretty immaculate. And a big part of that is because of how thematic this game is. So a big thing I say on my channel a lot of the time is how unbothered and unfazed I am about game thematics. But this game is helped massively with how logical everything is. Now, you need animals, of course you need the enclosures to put them in. If you don't have the space, then you can't build those enclosures. Animals might need a certain amount of prerequisites, because to look after quite a rare animal, you might need a certain amount of science and research to go into that. Everything is so logical, it's so well developed. And, even like shipping animals in from different continents, if you invest in partnership zoos with these partnership zoos from those continents, then you get these animals at a discount. Now, I think one of the talking points that I can't avoid mentioning, and I think should be mentioned, is how long this game takes. This is a 2 to 3 hour game, and that's even at the 2-player mark. If you want to go to that 3-4 player, you're probably even looking at more time than that, which is going to be a big obstacle to a lot of players. But I would say, despite that, I don't mind a longer game if the gameplay warrants it and if there's enough depth and strategy and fun to be had from it. I would say this is probably one of those rare exceptions where the gameplay transcends how long the game takes. We played this the other day, talking 2.5, 3 hours, and I was engrossed from the very get-go. I didn't find myself looking at my watch or seeing how long the game took, not even once, because I was that immersed in the cards and how I was going to play them, just waiting for my next turn so I could take my next action and build towards my goal. So yeah, this one, despite taking a long time, that's going to warrant going to take a lot of time investment. It's going to be pretty much your main event game, and whenever you play this one, the rewards and dividends you get back from that investment does definitely warrant it, in my opinion. The uptime as well is generally pretty good. There's not too much scope for analysis paralysis. And when it is another person's go, because there isn't a terrible amount of player interaction, then you can pretty much map things out and try to work your next goes. And sometimes even actions are lightning quick. You might want to just smash down a building or two, and that's going to take a matter of seconds before it's, you'll go again. So generally the uptime is great, and I would recommend, well, for me personally, I probably will never play this more than 3 players, and generally I'd always aim towards that 2-player mark. That feels right for me. It feels like you're in the game more, and it feels like you're going to get more towards that 2 to 2.5 hour mark rather than going above and beyond that. As I mentioned earlier, the player interaction is limited in this game. However, there is some interaction to be had, particularly when it comes to the card row. If you're both at a certain spot on the reputation track, you might be fighting over the same cards, which can be a big factor if you're after a particular one. Also, there's interaction here on the association board where, if you invest sooner on this spot, then you're going to get cheaper prices. So you want to get in there early and beat the other players to the punch. The same with the tokens here on the university and the partnership zoos area. Then those tokens only get refreshed every break phase. So if you're after a particular one and it's grabbed before you get there, then you're going to have to wait your turn until you can get that done. And of course, there is the race or the pressure to get the actual objectives done in the first place, because you can't actually share a spot with somebody else, because if this person had, 4 herbivores icons in their zoo, I can't do the same. I'm going to have to go above or below, which can massively throw off your plans depending on what's available to you. The replayability of this game is pretty much immense, to be honest. We've gone through one game here, we've gone through this many cards, and there's a whole stack there that wasn't even touched. So, and just imagine the cards that are going to be used next time. So yeah, there's an absolute ton of variability here, replayability, and no game is ever going to really feel the same, particularly if you actually have such small hand sizes. And I think that's going to be maybe another criticism that some more salty Eurogamers are going to pick on, is the fact that a lot of the time you are subject to card draws, and that deck is absolutely massive. So maybe finding things that you particularly want is, that's diluted by the sheer amount of cards. And I would say that's a completely fair observation. However, I never really felt that took away from my enjoyment of my plays from this one. It always felt like I kind of like that puzzle of working with what I have and not being too open. So I like that, how am I going to use those cards available to me, rather than let's just take an abundance of card and work with what I've got. So it's kind of, once you get that in your head and learn the feel of the game, I think you can get over that factor. And of course, as I said, one of the investments is to get more cards in your hand to give you that extra flexibility and things to work with. So yeah, replayability in this game is absolutely outstanding. So many things you can try, new endgame bonuses, new conservation projects, all that good stuff. So every game is going to feel very different from the last. I'm generally happy with the production of Ark Nova. I suppose, again, another major talking point and another valid criticism which people might not like is the fact that the artwork in this game is, well, it's not artwork, it's photographs. So yeah, you've got this real nice, wildlife photography, which, to be honest, hasn't actually taken away from the game at all for me. I think it actually works quite well. It's interesting to look at these cards. And again, that is a massive anomaly for me. I normally hate photographs and stills and things being in games, but for some reason it works for this game. And I think that is because of the actual subject matter. Who doesn't like looking at pictures of very beautiful animals? So yeah, I've got no issue at all there being photographs. And I think it actually doesn't actually feel disjointed from the actual gameplay. The actual rest of the components in terms of their quality, the cards are fine. They're nothing special, but they're gonna weather absolutely fine. The tiles and things are fine. It's not deluxe, but it's certainly not cheap. So it's somewhere in the middle there, and you do get a lot of tokens and stuff to play with, and even these little organisers come with the game. They're not spectacular, and they're not even, I don't think they're even tailored for the game itself, but they do help, and they help things set up and stuff. And another major bonus for me for this game is the sense of progression. You're always building a zoo, which feels satisfying in itself. I normally find these tile placement building style games satisfying, but the way you are crescendoing to big things, you're going to start with small animals. Those animals might have certain symbols on them, which might let you get kind of bigger animals out. Like this big bison here. He wants 3 African symbols, and you might be building African symbols in order to get this one out there and get this big chunk of points. So again, there's a lot to work with there. Again, you're always building up, filling up your zoo, and it feels like you're always moving forward and getting bigger and more grandiose. Always your income's increasing as you're bringing more attractions into your zoo. So yeah, that sense of progression is fantastic. And I love that kind of prerequisite thing as well in terms of your player board. For example, here, in order for me to get a new partnership token, I needed to upgrade my card to that particular card to the level 2 side. And to do that, you might have to climb up the certain track and things. Like this one, when I get to certain points on conservations, I can flip one of my cards over. Or when I get up to, on this reputation track, I can flip one of my cards over. Or get new workers. So again, you're always moving forward, getting bigger and better throughout the game. Okay, so final thoughts on Ark Nova. So every now and then a game reaches this level of hysteria in terms of its hype and popularity and just anticipation of people to get it played. And normally that is a bit of a death knell for a game because it's almost unmanageable or impossible to manage those expectations and to be as good as people hope it is or have heard it is. This one, I think, might be one of those rare exceptions where the gameplay is strong enough to manage and maybe even surmount those expectations, because I think there really isn't much wrong with this game at all. I enjoy pretty much everything about it, and one of the main elements is with how thematic it is. As I said before, theme really is nothing for me. But in this one, it is a big factor for me. It's going to really help me get this back to the table. Not like the gameplay is terribly difficult to learn anyway. Yes, it's a complex game, which again might be a big turn off for people, and an automatic no-no in relation to the depth and the weight of the game, and also the length of the game. But because it is so well embedded into this core system with just these 5 actions, all very simple in their own right, but the way they link with each other and the prioritization of how you're going to use them, that for me is just a brilliant system. I could not think of a better way to manage the depth of this game. The engines and combinations and instant rewards you can get from these cards is, again, it's so, the variability is just massive. I can't even begin to cover what this game does. Every card is unique. There's just different things you're going to find from game to game, different combos, different things that work together. And for me, that's what's going to keep games like this coming back to the table. So yeah, if you want a game that you can really almost make a lifestyle game, really, and play this one several times without even slightly getting bored of it, then this might be the game for you. I would say that because it is so long, that's going to be a bit of an obstacle for me to get it back to the table maybe as regularly as I would like, because of course I'm always playing new things and I can't often invest as much time into a particular game as I would like. But okay, going back to that thematic and mechanical element and the hybrid between the two, this one is certainly one of those games where I could not play it for 6 months or so and then get this one back to the table without having to relearn everything, because it is so intuitive and it is so logical. So I suppose the only question that's yet to be answered is, would I recommend Ark Nova? And the answer is 100% yes. This game is fantastic. So much to explore here. Just enjoyment from the get-go. Satisfying Euro mechanisms, tracks, all that good stuff. I love that scoring system that's used for, I suppose, taken from Rajas of the Ganges when you're crossing your 2-point scores against each other. I love that. It's a great tension to the game. I love the synergies, the cards. This core system is just amazing. I can't even fault that one bit. So yeah, there's pretty much nothing I don't like about the game other than the fact it is so long. That's the only thing that I can really criticise for me personally. And it is going to act as a bit of an obstacle for me to get this played maybe as much as I would like. But other than that, I think the gameplay is pretty much as good as it gets. It doesn't get much better than this. This is going to get my Elite Shield. I think it's going to be one of the most successful games of modern memory, really. Sometimes games just have that perfect blend of theme, mechanisms, lots to sink your teeth into, and replayability. And that is what Ark Nova is all about. So yeah, I think this is a strong recommendation for me. Believe the hype on this one. I'm not one to really get suckered into hype too much, but I think this time it warrants it, and I think a hell of a lot of people are going to enjoy this one. So that is Ark Nova